The rising sun illuminated the dusty streets of General Santos City, Philippines, as Manny Pacquiao, the eldest son of legendary boxer Manny Pacquiao, prepared for the day that would change his life. At 25, Manny carried not only the weight of the famous surname, but also a secret his father had kept for 2 decades. His fingers trembled slightly as he organized the documents that revealed the truth, a worn yellow folder he had accidentally found in his father's office during an unexpected visit. The old photographs and handwritten documents told a different story from the one the world knew about the boxing champion in 8 different weight classes. Manny's eyes, identical to his father's, fixed on the busy streets below his apartment window, observing the street vendors who were already beginning their daily journey. He had grown up hearing stories about how his father had started selling cigarettes and bread on those same streets before finding his way to boxing. The extreme poverty that Manny had faced was known to everyone, a narrative of overcoming that inspired millions. However, what the documents revealed showed a deeper layer of that story, something that few knew and that explained much about the man behind the myth. In his modest apartment's living room, Manny touched the small St. Michael medal he always wore around his neck, a gift from his father when he turned 10. The medal had a special meaning, something that now made even more sense in light of the revelations. Manny had always said that the warrior archangel had protected him in the most difficult moments, but had never fully explained the reason for his particular devotion. The papers in the yellow folder contained the answer, a promise made long ago in a moment of absolute despair. Childhood memories invaded Manny's mind as he prepared a simple coffee. His father's rare appearances at home, between fights and political commitments, the moments when he observed the national hero being acclaimed by crowds, and the nights when he found him alone, praying fervently in his room. There was always something in Manny's gaze that seemed distant, as if he carried an invisible burden beyond the weight of an entire nation's expectations. It was the look of someone who had an unpaid debt, a promise that needed to be fulfilled at any cost. With a coffee cup in one hand and the folder in the other, Manny sat down and took a deep breath. He needed to make a decision. The truth he had discovered wasn't just about his father, it was also about Tinay Maglalang, a mysterious figure who appeared in several old photographs alongside a young Manny, long before fame. The name appeared repeatedly in the documents, along with records of monthly financial transfers to a small province in the north of the country. For 20 years, even in times of greatest financial difficulty, those transfers had never ceased, always on the same day of each month. The streets of Manila were congested as Manny drove his modest car toward the airport. He had decided to travel to Baguio, the mountainous city to the north, where the records indicated that Tinay Maglalang lived. The decision hadn't been easy. Confronting this unknown part of his father's past also meant questioning his own history. In the rearview mirror, he observed the Philippine capital with its extreme contrasts between luxurious skyscrapers and improvised slums. It was the same contrast that defined Manny Pacquiao's trajectory, a man who had risen from the streets to become a world legend, but who apparently had never forgotten his origins, nor the promises made along the way. At the airport terminal, Manny noticed a group of fans surrounding a local boxer returning from an international fight. People were taking photos, asking for autographs, treating the athlete like a demigod. Manny knew that scene well. He had grown up seeing his father receive that adoration wherever he went. Manny Pacquiao wasn't just a boxer in the Philippines, he was a symbol of hope. A man who had proven that it was possible to overcome extreme poverty through determination and hard work. Now, with the documents in his backpack, Manny wondered if there was more to that story of overcoming than the world knew. The flight to Baguio was short, just 45 minutes flying over the green landscapes of the Philippine highlands. During the journey, Manny mentally revisited the fragments of information he had managed to gather. Tinay Maglalang was a name he had never heard mentioned at home, but the documents indicated a deep relationship. There were handwritten letters, some dated more than 20 years ago, in which his father expressed gratitude and made promises to never abandon. There were also records of school payments, doctors, and even the purchase of a small property, all discreetly financed by Manny, even when he was still fighting in small arenas for a few pesos. The city of Baguio welcomed Bayani with its characteristic fog and fresh mountain air. Known as the City of Pines, it was a popular refuge to escape the tropical heat of the rest of the archipelago. Many boxers, including his own father in his golden years, used the city's altitude for training. With the address written on a piece of paper, Bayani took a taxi toward the La Trinidad district, known for its strawberry terraced plantations. The driver, a middle-aged man named Efren, commented on how the city had changed in recent decades, but still maintained its provincial charm amid the growth. Upon arriving in front of a simple but well-maintained house with a small flowering garden at the entrance, Bayani felt his heart race. The lace curtains on the windows and the carved wooden cross on the door indicated the residence of someone with strong Catholic faith, something his father also deeply shared. Standing on the sidewalk, he observed an elderly lady watering the plants in the garden, her movements slow and careful. She must have been about 70, white hair tied in a traditional bun, dressed simply. Bayani needed no confirmation. He instinctively knew he was looking at Tinay Maglalang, the woman his father had secretly supported for 2 decades, and whose existence he had never mentioned to the family. The initial meeting with Tinay was marked by surprise and contained emotion. The elderly lady received Bayani with characteristic Filipino hospitality, inviting him in without asking questions, as if she had been expecting that visit for a long time. The interior of the house was modest, but impeccably organized and clean. On the walls, Bayani immediately noticed several framed photographs, some showing Manny Pacquiao at different stages of his career. They weren't official photos or from magazines, but personal records, including one that caught his particular attention. His father, very young, sitting on the steps of a simple wooden house, with an arm around the shoulders of a boy approximately his age at the time. Tinay served salabat tea, the traditional Filipino ginger drink, while observing Bayani with eyes that seemed to penetrate his soul. There was a serenity in her behavior that contrasted with the tension the young man felt. The lady's wrinkled hands trembled slightly as she held the cup, but her voice remained firm when she finally broke the silence, mentioning how he resembled his father. There was no accusation in her words, just a quiet observation, like someone commenting on the weather. Bayani realized that she knew exactly who he was, even though they had never met before. The small room was full of religious symbols, images of Catholic saints, a rosary hanging near the window, and a home altar with candles lit before an image of the Santo Niño, the child Jesus highly venerated in the Philippines. Tinay explained that she prayed daily for the well-being of Manny and his family, including Bayani and his siblings, calling each by name. The revelation caused a chill in the young man. How could she know all their names if she had never officially been part of their lives? The mystery only deepened, leaving him even more confused about the true nature of the relationship between his father and this woman. With calm gestures, Tinay got up and went to an old wooden chest in the corner of the room. From inside, she removed a metal box decorated with traditional Filipino motifs. Her fingers caressed the lid for a moment, as if revisiting memories, before handing it to Bayani. Inside were dozens of letters, some yellowed by time, all handwritten by Manny Pacquiao. The dates covered more than 2 decades, from before his international fame to recent periods. Bayani recognized his father's handwriting, that slightly inclined and firm lettering so characteristic. The letters were organized chronologically, telling a parallel story to the one the world knew about the boxing champion. As Bayani began to read the oldest correspondence, dated from when his father was only 17, Tinay remained in respectful silence, allowing him to absorb the information at his own pace. The first letters revealed a desperate young Manny facing extreme poverty in General Santos City, determined to find a path in boxing, but constantly defeated by circumstances. The content showed a vulnerable side that his father had never publicly exhibited, confessions of fear, moments of near giving up, and promises made in moments of absolute despair. The name Dalisay appeared repeatedly in the letters, someone for whom Manny swore to fight and win, someone who had completely changed his perspective on life. The revelations continued as the afternoon progressed in Baguio. Tinay prepared a simple dinner of sinigang, the traditional sour Filipino stew, while Bayani remained immersed in the letters. The story that emerged from those handwritten pages was deeply moving. Tinay Maglalang wasn't a secret lover as he had initially suspected, but a primary school teacher who had changed the course of Manny Pacquiao's life 20 years ago, when extreme poverty plagued the Pacquiao family in General Santos City. It was she who had found a young Manny sleeping on the streets after being expelled from home by his violent stepfather. The teacher, then working at a school for underprivileged children, had offered not only temporary shelter but something much more valuable. She had believed in him when no one else did. The letters revealed that Tinay had a son named Dalisay, a young man with great talent for boxing, who dreamed of becoming a national champion. The two young men, Manny and Dalisay, became like brothers during the months that Pacquiao lived in the teacher's modest house. They trained together, dreamed together, and promised to take care of each other regardless of what happened. But fate had different plans. While Manny was beginning to win his first amateur fights, Dalisay was diagnosed with a congenital heart condition that prevented him from continuing in the sport. The diagnosis came too late. During a particularly intense training session, the young man's heart couldn't resist. The death of Dalisay had deeply marked both Manny and Tinay. The letters from this period were stained with tears, with unstable handwriting revealing the emotional state of the young boxer. It was then that Manny had made a solemn promise. He would fight not only for himself but for Dalisay too, fulfilling the dream that his heart brother couldn't achieve. He had promised Tinay that, if he ever succeeded, he would never abandon her, treating her as the second mother she had indeed been to him. The promise had been sealed with an oath before the image of Saint Michael the Archangel, the warrior saint whom Dalisay so venerated, and whose medal Bayani now carried without knowing its true history. The following years were documented with meticulous care in the letters. Even when Manny barely had money to feed himself between fights, he always set aside a small amount to send to Tinay. When he began to gain notoriety, he increased the value of the contributions, always discreetly, through a system that didn't directly link his name to the transfers. It wasn't shame that motivated his secrecy, but a feeling that that relationship was too sacred to be exposed to public scrutiny. For Manny, Tinay and the memory of Dalisay represented his roots, the strength that kept him humble even when the world began to worship him as a boxing demigod. As night fell over Baguio, Bayani finally understood the extent of that family secret. His father, the man who inspired millions with his story of overcoming, carried a much deeper motivation than the world had ever imagined. Each fight, each title conquered, wasn't just for personal glory or for the Philippines. It was also for a young man who had never had the chance to realize his own dream. Manny Pacquiao's philanthropy, so well known and celebrated, had roots in this promise made decades ago. A commitment to honor the memory of someone who had believed in him when he had nothing but dreams and determination. The following morning brought a clarity that went beyond the sun, illuminating the mountains of Baguio. Tinay invited Bayani to walk to a small local cemetery, where a simple but well-maintained tomb marked the resting place of Dalisay Maglalang. The modest headstone contrasted with fresh floral arrangements that were changed weekly. A detail that Tinay revealed was provided by Manny's instructions, who even at a distance and busy with his public life, had never ceased to honor that memory. Before the tomb, Bayani felt an unexpected connection with this uncle he had never known, but whose spirit had somehow lived through his father's achievements. Among the flowers placed on the tomb, Bayani noticed small objects, miniatures of the world champion belts that Manny had conquered over the years. They were perfect replicas, specially made by his father after each title. Tinay explained that, after each great victory, Manny always called her before even speaking to the press, sharing the conquest with Dalisay's memory. It was a private ritual he had maintained throughout his career, a way of telling his friend that he had fulfilled his promise, that he continued fighting for both, that the shared dream was being realized. Back at Tinay's house, the lady showed Bayani a simple room kept untouched for 2 decades. It was the room that Manny and Dalisay had shared during those crucial months. The walls were decorated with old posters of famous boxers from the 90s, and a small table displayed trophies from local amateur competitions that the two young men had conquered together. In a corner, 2 pairs of boxing gloves worn from use hung side by side, a silent reminder of youthful dreams. Tinay revealed that Manny still visited that room during his rare discreet visits to Baguio, moments when he ceased to be the world icon to return to being just a young man with precious memories. Dalisay's impact on Manny's life went far beyond the emotional aspect or the promise made. Tina explained that her son had been a born strategist, obsessively studying the styles of great boxers and developing innovative techniques. Many of the characteristic movements that made Manny famous in the ring, the unique combination of speed with unexpected angles of attack, had been originally theorized by Dalisay during their long night conversations. The revolutionary style that had allowed Pacquiao to conquer titles in 8 different categories therefore carried the intellectual essence of his lost friend, a way to keep his spirit alive in every fight. As the day progressed, Bayani began to understand why his father had kept this chapter of his life secret, even from the family. It wasn't just a matter of privacy, it was a way to preserve something sacred, a connection that transcended fame and fortune. For Manny Pacquiao, Tine and the memory of Dalisay represented an emotional sanctuary, a space where he could reconnect with his purest origins and with the true essence of his journey. It was also a constant reminder that his mission went beyond titles and personal glory. He carried with him the responsibility to honor not only his own potential, but also the legacy of one who couldn't realize his dreams. The third day in the mountain city brought an even more impactful revelation. Tine led Bayani to a primary school in the vicinity of Baguio, a modest establishment that mainly served children from low-income families. To the young man's surprise, the school was called Dalisay Maglalang Educational Institute, and a portrait of the deceased young man adorned the main entrance. Upon entering the building, Bayani noticed that, although simple, the structure was impeccably maintained, with well-equipped classrooms and a small multi-purpose gymnasium that included a boxing ring. The inauguration plaque, discreetly positioned in a corner, didn't mention Manny Pacquiao's name as benefactor, only indicated a grateful friend. Walking through the school corridors, Bayani observed dozens of children in simple but clean uniforms, studying with enthusiasm. Tine, who despite her advanced age, still acted as honorary director of the institute, explained that the school had been secretly founded by Manny 15 years ago, when his career began to generate significant income. The educational project didn't carry the famous boxer's name, nor was it publicized among his numerous known philanthropic initiatives. It was, according to Tine, the way Manny had found to continue the work she had begun decades ago, offering opportunities to children who, like himself in the past, just needed a chance to transform their lives. The school gymnasium revealed another facet of the secret legacy. There, young people of different ages practiced boxing under the guidance of qualified trainers, all discreetly hired with resources sent by Manny. It wasn't just about training future champions. The program included rigorous educational monitoring and regular medical care, especially cardiological, ensuring that no child would go through what had happened to Dalisay. Tine showed Bayani records of dozens of young people who, thanks to the program, had obtained scholarships to universities, some pursuing careers in sports, others in medicine, engineering, and other professions. The true objective, she explained, wasn't to replicate Manny's trajectory, but to offer alternatives that Dalisay had never had. That afternoon, Bayani witnessed something that touched him deeply. In a special room of the school, filled with medical equipment, children with heart conditions similar to what had victimized Dalisay received specialized treatment. Tine explained that this wing, fully funded by Manny, operated in partnership with a Manila hospital, periodically bringing specialists to attend not only the students, but any child in the region who needed it. The families never received bills for the procedures, nor did they know who was really funding that essential service. Over the years, dozens of lives had been saved through this silent initiative, a perfect tribute to Dalisay's memory. During dinner that night, Tine finally explained to Bayani why she believed his father had never revealed this story, even to the family. It wasn't about keeping a secret out of shame or guilt, but about preserving the purity of the promise made. For Manny, mixing this part of his life with his public image would mean risking transforming something sacred into just another element of his commercial narrative of overcoming. Additionally, there was the fear that the sensationalist media could distort the story, transforming his relationship with Tine and the memory of Dalisay into something scandalous or questionable. It was protection not only of the friend's memory, but also a shield for Tine, allowing her to continue her work far from the relentless spotlights that accompanied everything related to the famous boxer. The following morning, Bayani received an unexpected call. His father, Manny Pacquiao, had discovered his trip to Baguio and wanted to talk to him. The champion's normally confident voice sounded hesitant on the phone, carefully asking what Bayani had discovered and how he felt. For the first time, the young man perceived true vulnerability in his father's voice, an emotional openness he rarely demonstrated. When Bayani mentioned Dalisay, a long silence established on the line, followed by emotion-laden words. Manny didn't deny anything, didn't try to justify the secret kept for so many years. He just asked if he could meet him in Baguio the next day, to finally share this part of his history personally. The meeting between father and son took place in the small cemetery, before Dalisay's tomb. Manny arrived alone, driving a simple car, dressed discreetly to avoid being recognized. Upon seeing Bayani waiting, he embraced him at length with an uncommon intensity for someone usually reserved in his demonstrations of affection. Together, they placed fresh flowers on the grave, and Manny formally introduced his son to the friend who had departed too early. With a choked voice, the world champion personally told his story, filling in the gaps that still remained, sharing memories that he had never entrusted to anyone besides Tinay. The mountain sun illuminated the two men, while generations and secrets finally connected in a moment of absolute truth. Walking slowly through the gardens of the school he had secretly founded, Manny explained to Bayani why he had never mentioned Dalisay in the numerous interviews about his journey of overcoming. There was something sacred about that friendship, a purity he feared contaminating with public exposure. Additionally, there was the fear that his deepest motivation, if revealed, could be commercialized or trivialized by the media machine that surrounded his figure. Manny confessed that, in the most difficult moments of his career, when facing seemingly unbeatable opponents or fighting with painful injuries, it was Dalisay's memory that propelled him forward, a force he considered almost too sacred to be explained in press conferences. What most surprised Bayani was discovering that his own name carried a connection to this story. Bayani in Filipino means hero, and had been chosen by Manny as a veiled tribute to Dalisay, who had always called his friend Bayani during their training sessions, long before worldwide fame. In naming his firstborn, Manny had found a way to connect the two parts of his life, creating a silent bridge between his past and his present. The revelation deeply moved Bayani, who finally understood why his father had always demonstrated a special expectation about his choices and character, without ever fully explaining the reason. At Tinay's house, the three shared a simple meal, recalling stories and connecting lives that, although separated by circumstances, were deeply intertwined. Manny revealed that he visited Baguio discreetly at least twice a year on significant dates, Dalisay's birthday and the day of his departure. They were moments of reflection and renewal of commitments when the boxer, away from the world's gaze, could reconnect with the essence of his journey. Tiny, in turn, shared how she had followed each step of Manny's career, seeing in him not just the great champion he had become, but always the determined young man who had promised to fight for two dreams. Before returning to Manila, Manny led Bayani to a special location in the mountains near Baguio. It was a natural viewpoint, overlooking verdant valleys and terraced plantations characteristic of the region. There he revealed that he and Dalisay used to train in the cold mornings, dreaming of a future that seemed impossible given their circumstances. In that same place, after his friend's funeral, Manny had made his most solemn promise, that he would live not only his own life, but would carry with him Dalisay's interrupted potential, transforming it into fuel to overcome any obstacle. The place had become a personal sanctuary, visited before each major fight of his career, a private ritual that none of the documentaries or biographies had ever mentioned. On the return flight, father and son talked with unprecedented openness. Manny explained that he intended, after his definitive retirement, to establish an official foundation in memory of Dalisay, gathering all the secret initiatives he had maintained over the years. It wouldn't be a grandiose or mediatic project, but something focused on concrete results, identifying young talents in impoverished communities and offering them not just sports training, but complete education and preventive medical monitoring. The goal was to prevent other promises from being lost like Dalisay, whether due to undiagnosed health conditions or lack of structured opportunities. Back home, Bayani found his mother and siblings curious about the sudden trip. With Manny's permission, he shared the story of Dalisay and Tinay, revealing a dimension of the patriarch that the family completely unknown. To everyone's surprise, Bayani's mother showed no resentment for the secret kept for so many years. On the contrary, her tears revealed understanding and respect for the depth of that bond. She confessed that she had always perceived a special motivation in Manny, something that went beyond personal ambition or even the desire to lift the family out of poverty, but had respected his silence, intuitively understanding that there was a story he would share when he was ready. In the following weeks, the Pacquiao family visited Baguio together for the first time. Tina received everyone with the same maternal affection she had dedicated to the young Manny decades ago. The secret school was officially presented to the family members, who were moved to see the silent impact that initiative had had on the lives of hundreds of children over the years. Together, they participated in a small private ceremony at Dalice's tomb, where each family member placed flowers, symbolically recognizing the importance of that friendship which, even interrupted by death, had indirectly shaped the destiny of all of them. The 20-year secret, finally revealed, didn't diminish Manny Pacquiao's legacy in any way. On the contrary, it added a dimension of human depth to his already extraordinary story. For Bayani, the discovery transformed his perception of his father, no longer just as the national icon or the world champion, but as a man whose greatness resided mainly in loyalty to a promise made in youth. The St. Michael medal, which he had always carried without fully understanding its meaning, now rested on his chest with a different weight. It wasn't just a religious symbol, but a tangible link with a story of friendship, loss, and redemption that transcended generations. Manny Pacquiao's true legacy, Bayani understood, wasn't in the titles or the accumulated fortune, but in the unwavering fidelity to an oath made when he had nothing but dreams and the extended hand of a friend who had...
Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.